So let's do our Unit 6 test. So if we scroll all the way down to the bottom where it says Unit 6 test, we can right click on that, open that link in a new window, get the test started, and then resize it. I like to resize it so I can still read the whole question and use my scroll bar. And then back here, you're going to click on your first unit, Unit Introduction, Movement and Rhythm, and then resize that window. Perfect. So you can see the textbook and read the questions. Let's read through our question bank. Number 1, Thomas Hart Benton was influential in regionalism, a style of art that focused mostly on what? Kinetic sculpture, scenes of French animals, scenes of rural America, or portraits of famous people. Question 2. An artwork that has moving parts is an example of what type of art? Fauvist, futurist, random rhythm, or kinetic? Question 3. What is Alexander Calder known for inventing? Watercolor paints, murals, photography, or the mobile? Question 4. Top-down view is often used in book design, Fauvist art, kinetic art, video games. Question 5. Which type of rhythm is an artwork using if it switches back and forth between two variations on the same element? Random, flowing, regular, alternating. Question 6. Rosa Bonheur is known for her realistic paintings of what? Children, city scenes, boats, animals. 7. The repetition of similar wavy lines or shapes creates what type of rhythm? Flowing, combination, alternating, or random. Question 8. Which of the following artists painted in a Fauvist style? Henri Matisse, Rosa Bonheur, Alexander Calder, or Thomas Hart Benton? Question 9. Is blank is a principle of design that describes a visual effect that encourages a viewer's eye to move across the parts of an artwork in a specific direction. Is it movement guide, visual movement, actual movement, or motion drawing? And finally, question 10. Which of the following was a short-lived Italian art movement that rejected political and artistic traditions while embracing youth, speed, technology, industry, and violence? Kinetic art, Fauvism, Futurism, or regionalism? All right, let's start reading and we'll keep our eyes open for answers to those questions. Section preview. In this section, you will learn about movement and rhythm, learn about how movement and rhythm are created using different art elements, learn about how movement is used in specific artworks, draw ants or some other object from a top-down perspective, organize the drawn objects to demonstrate movement, and edit individual objects to make your project more visually interesting. In the lesson Movement and Rhythm Overview, you learn about movement and rhythm and how they are used in different types of artworks and designs. In order to distinguish between the two types of movement in this lesson, the first type will be referred to as visual movement, while the second will be called actual movement. Visual movement is a principle of design that describes a visual effect that encourages a viewer's eyes to move across the parts of an artwork in a specific direction. For example, in a line drawing of a mountain, all of the lines of the mountain would create visual movement upward, drawing the eyes up to the peak of the mountain. This would be true of photographs or paintings of a mountain too. The triangular shape of a mountain makes it a natural visual movement toward its peak. In a similar way, a road drawn out to a vanishing point would encourage the viewer's eye to follow along the road towards its vanishing point. Actual movement is the way artists use lines, shapes, color, and other elements to capture the way people, animals, or objects move through space. Actual movement can also contribute to the way the eyes move across the artwork, but it doesn't always do this. actual movement is not considered a principle of design. Visual movement. There are many different ways to create visual movement in an artwork. Let us learn about how specific art elements can be used to create visual movement. Lines. Lines can be used to create visual movement in artwork. This is a common way to create visual movement because it's easy for the eye to follow the direction of a line. Artists can create visual movement by drawing lines of all types, such as straight or curved, toward a focal point. Drawing a series of lines all moving in the same general direction is another way to create visual movement. In addition to actual lines, implied lines can also add to an artist's visual movement. For example, implied lines can be created from many people in an artwork looking at the same direction or toward a single focal point. Implied lines might also be created through all of the objects in an artwork leaning toward a single focal point. The actual movement of objects in an artwork can strengthen an artwork's visual movement if the actual movement is headed in the same direction or towards a specific point. Form is what artists working in 3 dimensions use to create visual movement. For example, the flowing lines of a statue's form might encourage the viewer's eyes to move along it, or the statue's form spiraling into a single point might encourage the viewer's eyes to stop there. In addition to the way that the form of a sculpture affects the way people look at it, the form of a sculpture can also seem static or active, depending on the type of actual movement an artist is trying to create. For example, the statue of a man sitting on a rock would seem static compared to the statue of a woman running. Whether a sculpture is static or active has little effect on the visual movement of the artwork, but the form of a sculpture does determine its edges and lines and how they might encourage a viewer's eyes to move. Smooth forms are like smooth lines, encouraging the viewer's eye to move along them, while complex or jagged forms force the viewer's eyes to stop or change direction. Shape. A shape can seem like it has visual movement, or it can be a part of an arrangement of shapes that give an artwork a feeling of visual movement. Sometimes the visual movement that people see in a shape is based on the context for that shape. For example, the shape of a person running or a bird flying is something that people associate with actual movement, which can strengthen its visual movement. Alternatively, the shape of a person lying on the ground is something that people associate with stillness. Sometimes the visual and actual movement that people see in a shape is based on its symmetry, its balance, or what type of shape it is. An organic or natural shape like a leaf floating in air or an ocean wave might seem to have more visual and actual movement than a square or a triangle. Shapes with blurry edges might seem to have more visual movement than those with perfectly straight edges. Unless they're part of a pattern, an arrangement of shapes is usually better at creating implied lines of visual movement rather than actual movement. For example, a painting of people dancing in a circle might not have an actual circle in it, but could imply a circle through the actual movement of the dancers. The implied circle would create a visual movement, encouraging the viewer's eyes to travel around and around the painting. Let's do this checkpoint. Question 1. In the example image, what direction does the visual movement encourage the eyes to travel in? From the top to the bottom, from right to left, from left to right, or in a circle? Well, she is facing and moving towards the left, so I would say from right to left. I don't know if I'm right or not. Let me know how I did on that. Movement, both visual and actual, is present in many types of artwork. Let us learn about some of them. Futurism was a short-lived Italian art movement inspired by Filippo Tommaso Marinetti's Futurist Manifesto, in which he rejected political and artistic traditions while embracing youth, speed, technology, industry, and violence. Hey, I remember that in here. one of those questions asked about that. Embracing this one. Which of the following was a short-lived Italian art movement that rejected political and artistic traditions while embracing youth, speed, technology, industry, and violence? Futurism. Futurists worked on many artistic mediums to capture life in motion, including painting, sculpture, theater, textiles, music, and architecture, among many others. The energy of Italian futurists inspired equivalent movements in England, Russia, and other places. In the painting Cyclist, the Russian futurist Natalia Goncharova used motion lines and repeated shapes to capture the actual forward movement of the cyclist riding over the cobblestone street. Motion lines are straight or curved lines that follow a moving object with line length and shape indicating the speed and direction of the actual movement. So I'm taking a look at those motion lines. Here we go. We got some motion lines right here. Okay, nice. Maybe some motion lines along the back, and here's some diagonals. All right, motion lines can look very different depending on what type of actual motion is being shown. For example, the motion lines around a bird's flapping wings would look very different from those drawn behind a speeding car. The side-to-side visual motion of the painting relates to the actual speed and uneven motion Goncharova attempted to capture. The futurists experimented with many different techniques in their attempts to capture actual movement in art, but often they used brightly contrasting colors and thick, strong lines. Comic books are magazines that combine images and text in order to tell a story. Comic books rely on visual movement to tell a story that makes sense. Like comic strips, comic books are made up of arrangements of squares, rectangles, or other shapes called panels. Panels usually show characters and scenes, usually combined with dialogue, and are usually arranged in a grid on the page. English speakers read from left to right and top to bottom. Comic book artists take advantage of that pattern of visual movement to lead readers through a comic book story. In addition to the visual movement on the page, comic book artists take advantage of the left to right, top to bottom visual movement within each panel. The visual movement in each panel can contribute to the visual movement of all of the panels on the page. Sometimes comic book artists will use techniques to disrupt the pattern of visual movement in order to emphasize something by stopping or changing the way a reader's eyes travel through the comic. And this is a page from Winsor McCay's comic, Little Nemo in Slumberland, with arrows showing the visual movement through the panels in the comic. So there are those, I guess those were called arrows. They kind of look like lines to me. Okay. And it looks like Mrs. Girot skipped a page. Page 3 here. Kinetic Art is an artwork that has moving parts or uses motion to generate an effect. They are sometimes powered by the wind, a motor, or the viewer of the artwork. Kinetic art can look like almost anything as long as it moves. With a piece of kinetic art, the way it moves is part of the movement that the artist wants to express. In addition to the way it moves, though, its lines, shape, or form may have a visual movement that either works with or against the artist's physical movement. For example, a kinetic artwork that looks like it should spin around, but that has an actual physical motion that is up and down, may have an actual movement which contrasts with its visual movement in order to create a point of focus where the two types of movement intersect. An art car is considered kinetic art because it's a piece of art that moves. Many kinetic sculpture races are held around the United States every year, involving cars, boats, bikes, and other moving art constructions. The photograph is of Marta Pan's floating kinetic sculpture located at the Kröller Art Museum in the Netherlands. The water's current moves the bottom half of the sculpture, while the top half is spun about by the wind. Marta Pan was a 20th century Hungarian sculptor who focused on kinetic art. So there we go. The bottom part is moved by the water and the top part is moved by the wind. And unfortunately, I just feel like this picture is insufficient to really show us what's happening. Oh, maybe I can slide to the right. Let's see. Aha! There we go. So is it saying that it can bob up and down here like a little ducky, and then this top part can spin, revolve around this little point? Yes. I know there was a question over here related to kinetic art. Let's see if we can find it. All right. Dun-dun-dun-dun, not Thomas Hart. An artwork that has moving parts is an example of what type of art? I wonder if I can make this. Yeah, what type of art? Okay, so we covered Futurism, kinetic art, and comic books. Oh, look, we have another checkpoint. If you're watching a kinetic sculpture spin around, what are you seeing? Visual movement, motion lines, futurism, or actual movement? If it's actually spinning around, you're seeing actual movement, right? Gosh, I hope so. Let me know if I got that one right, guys. Rhythm. In music, rhythm is music's tempo or beat. In visual art, rhythm uses patterns of repeated art elements to create a type of rhythm that can be experienced visually. An artwork's visual rhythm is often used to strengthen an artwork's visual movement. Rhythm is different from pattern. Pattern is more concerned with how something looks or how well it seems to match what it's decorating. Many patterns are even meant to fade into the background. Rhythm is more concerned with how repeated visual elements will affect how someone looks at an artwork. Let us learn more about how specific art elements can be used to create rhythm. Lines. Lines in an artwork can be repeated exactly or with only some of a line's qualities repeated. For example, in one part of an artwork, identical curving, green, thick, and fuzzy lines might be repeated in a horizontal row. A vertical column of lines with the same curving shape but red, thin, and sharp would contribute to the rhythm of the horizontal row of lines, almost like two different instruments playing the same tune. A diagonal row of identical curving lines that grows increasingly transparent would create a different kind of rhythmic feeling. The increased repetition of lines to create rhythm can create a strong visual movement, but if there's too much repetition, the repeated lines can form a pattern that fades into the background. Shapes. Like lines, shapes can be repeated exactly or with only some of a shape's qualities repeated. Sequences of different shapes can also be used to create more complicated rhythms. For example, patterns of circles, squares, and more complicated shapes could be used to create a decorative background with a strong and complex rhythm. Human-made objects and buildings often have repeating shapes. By drawing or painting the repeated shapes of a human-made object, an artist can easily add shape-based rhythm and movement to an artwork. The natural world is also full of repeating geometric patterns and shapes that artists can use in their artwork, such as the shape of a rose's petals, the spiral of a snail shell, or the curve of a crashing wave. The simpler the shape is, the stronger the rhythm and visual movement. A strong rhythm is one that is easy to see. For example, a mountain range drawn with simple triangular shapes would have a much stronger and more obvious rhythm than a realistic painting of a specific mountain range. Colors can be used to add subtle or expressive rhythm to an artwork. Colors can be used in combination with lines and shapes or by themselves to create rhythm. The repetition of a specific contrasting color can draw the eye from place to place. Highly contrasting colors can help to create a much stronger artistic rhythm. Combinations. In the same way that musicians play together with different instruments to perform a song, artists combine the rhythms of different elements together to make their artwork more interesting. If there are too many different instruments or the musicians aren't playing well together, the music can sound harsh, discordant, and cacophonous. In the same way, if an artist adds too many separate visual rhythms to an artwork, the artwork can seem muddled and confusing. A good use of rhythm and movement would result in an artwork in which all of the elements seem to work together in the same way that a well-practiced band performs well together. Okay, checkpoint. In the example image, which art element is creating the strongest rhythm? Oh, this is a composition by Theo van Doesburg, a painting of squares and rectangles of different sizes and repeated colors. I think that was a typo. Of blue, orange, yellow, and beige. All right, so we've got shape and color. Let's see, texture, form, color, line, and shape isn't one of those options, so it's gonna be color. Woohoo! All right, next. Types of rhythm, thank goodness. Okay, that's what I was hoping. In the same way that different types of music use different types of rhythm, there are also different types of visual form. Let us learn about and see examples of different types of rhythm. Alternating rhythm is created by the back and forth of two variations of the same art element, such as two different colors. Which type of rhythm is, and if it switches back and forth between two variations on the same element? Alternating. One of the simplest examples of this type of rhythm is the pattern of black and white squares on a chessboard. Alternating rhythm can also look more complex, such as a row of trees against a skyline. Because a tree shape is more complex than a square, the trees would create a more complicated alternating rhythm than the chessboard. Flowing rhythm is created by the repetition of similar wavy lines or shapes. Motion lines can create a flowing rhythm. The lines used to draw the currents in a river might create a flowing rhythm. Flowing rhythm could also be used when drawing a rolling hillside or a billowy cloudscape. Let's see. Okay. An artwork that has no, what is that? No, top, no, type of, okay, we did that one. Nope, Rosa, okay. The repetition of similar wavy lines or shapes creates a flowing, is that right? Yes. Similar wavy lines and shapes, got that one. Woohoo, good job. Random rhythm repeats the same elements without a pattern. For example, clouds floating across the sky might form a random pattern, or breadcrumbs scattered across a table. Regular rhythm repeats the different elements over and over again in a particular order. For example, in a drawing of a city street, the repeated lines and colors used to draw the telephone poles and buildings might create a regular rhythm. And I don't think we had any more questions. Nope, about that. Okay. Oh, let's see. Blank is a principle of design that describes a visual effect that encourages a viewer's eyes to move across the parts of an artwork in a specific direction. Oh, what do you think? Visual movement? Yeah. Movement and rhythm in art. Artists use movement and rhythm as a way to organize their artwork. Actual movement can make the people, animals, or machines in an artwork seem more active, while visual movement can help to guide the way a viewer experiences an artwork. Rhythm can be used to mimic the beats of music, but is more often used by artists as a way of arranging their work. Let's learn about specific artists and their use of movement and rhythm. Thomas Hart Benton. I know that's one of our questions, right up at the top. Here we go. Influential and regionalism, a style of art that focused mostly on what? Kinetic? Scenes of French animals? Scenes of rural America? Or portraits of famous people? Let's find out. 20th century painter and muralist who focused on painting scenes from everyday American life. During World War I, Benton worked as an artist for the U.S. Navy, documenting shipyard work and designing camouflage patterns for ship painters. Benton was influential in regionalism, a type of art that focused mostly on scenes of rural America. Scenes of rural America. Good. It became popular in the United States starting in the 1930s. Regionalism was also called American scene painting. Grant Wood, John Stewart Curry, and Benton were considered the regionalist triumvirate. Sorry. Let's try it again. Regionalist triumvirate. Triumvirate. Benton considered his artwork to be a response to modernism an artistic movement which emphasized a break from traditional artistic expression in favor of new techniques and art subjects. Regionalism came to be seen as an opposite response to the abstract and non-representational European modernist art being promoted in New York at the time. In Cut the Line, Benton painted the launching of a newly constructed ship. That's what we're seeing there. As the spectators and dockyard workers lean toward the ship, they create movement from left to right, creating implied lines pointing toward the massive bulk of the naval ship on the right. Can you see that there? All those implied. There's actually a physical line right there and a physical line right here, an actual line. But we do have a lot of implied lines moving from left to right. Good job. The movement in the painting creates a feeling of excitement and anticipation. Rosa Bonheur. I know we have a question on Rosa. Where is that one? Rosa Bonheur is known for her realistic paintings of what? Children, city scenes, boats, or animals? Let's find out. Rosa Bonheur was a 19th century realist painter and sculptor. She was known for her realistic paintings of animals. Ding, ding, ding. In France, painters and sculptors of realistic animals were called animalières. Animalière. Animalière. Her pursuit of realism led her to study animal physiognomy and anatomy. She even dissected animals in butcher shops. Bonheur's paintings were quite popular through Europe and England. The fame and fortune she gained through her painting gave her the resources to keep many strange and unusual animals in her home, including lions. She also received special permission from the Parisian police to wear trousers in public, which was illegal for women at the time. This painting, entitled Le Marché aux Chevaux, or The Horse Fair, is 8 feet tall and 16 feet wide. I want to take a look at that real quick. Wow, that thing is huge. Did you know you can hold down Shift and scroll and it'll let you go left and right like that? Huh? That is a huge painting. It was exhibited at the 1853 Paris Salon and earned her international acclaim. The horse fair uses movement to draw the eye from left to right as the horses circle toward, then away from the viewer. Let's take a look at that. Toward, then away from the viewer, just like they said. Wow. The shape and movement of the horse's hooves and legs create a visual movement that mimics the staccato, crowded beats of many horses moving at once. The movement of the painting is broken up at the center by the rearing back and white horses. Rearing black and white horses, which creates a single focus point. Let's find that. Oh, these two right here. They're the focal point. That black contrasting with the white and the rearing up. I can see it. The man in the white shirt glancing backward emphasizes this focus by creating an implied line between his eyes and the top of the rearing black horse. Let's take a look at that, shall we? This man right here. Yep, look at that. Look at him. His eyes are gazing up in that direction. Nice job. Well explained. Oh, was there a question? We already answered it. Alexander Calder. I know I saw one. Where is it? Alexander Calder. What is he known for inventing? Watercolor paints, murals, photography, or the mobile? Alexander Calder was a 20th century sculptor, most well known for inventing a type of kinetic art called the mobile in 1931. A mobile is a moving sculpture made up of balanced hanging objects that spin in space. After seeing Calder's spinning sculptures, Marcel Duchamp was the first person to call them mobiles. Calder's mobiles were often light enough to be moved by air currents in a room. The movement of the artwork was the actual movement of the mobile. Calder also built sculptures that didn't move, which he called stabiles. In this untitled sculpture from 1968, outside Lisbon's Belém Cultural Center, the largest performance and fine art facility in Portugal, Calder disrupts the movement of the straight horizontal lines with the curving vertical lines. Calder's use of movement gives the sculpture a strange organic feel. Let's take a look. Oops. There we go. Oh yes, that is strangely organic for sure. But in a good way. The arching lines and shapes of his sculpture are light and lively, giving the sculpture a sense of visual movement flowing from left to right. The sculpture has a light and regular vertical rhythm. From left to right, let's see. Whoops. Do you see it from left to right? I don't know, for some reason, my eye starts here at the very bottom and goes from right to left. I have a different experience. What, you know, how you see it might be different too. So what's the answer? Alexander Calder is known for inventing the mobile. Henri Matisse. I don't think we had a question about Henri, but let's see. Dun, dun, dun. No, we answered. We got top down. This is just... which of the following artists painted in the Fauve style? Oh, we have to find out who the Fauve artist is. Oh, here we go. Henri Matisse, along with Pablo Picasso, is considered one of the most influential artists of the 20th century. In the early 20th century, he founded and led a group of artists whose artwork was so full of bright, high contrast, and non-realistic color that the artists were described as fauves, which in French means wild beasts. The Fauves only continued on as a group for a few years, exhibiting together 3 times. Even after the other artists moved into their own styles, Matisse continued to paint in a Fauvist style. There we go. Henri Matisse was a Fauve, a wild animal. In their short, explosive outburst of work, the Fauves were inspired and influenced by indigenous, non-Western art, such as artwork from Africa, South America, and Polynesia. You can see that influence here, right? In La Danse, Matisse uses just 4 colors and simple lines to paint 5 dancers spinning in a circle. The circular movement of the dancers, along with the curving line between the green ground and the blue sky or water, creates a kind of flowing rhythm, which is broken up by the 2 dancers reaching for each other in the foreground. You see that? Oh yeah, there's that flowing line. Nice, look at all those flowing lines. Beautiful. Even that break in the rhythm is softened by the dancer's knee on the other side of the circle. The movement is an unstable one because it almost seems as though the dancer in the foreground may fall to the ground if she doesn't catch the other dancer's hand, which could bring the dance to a sudden stop. Oh yes. Oh yes. Matisse painted 2 other versions of this painting, one of which is a mural 47 feet long and 11 feet high. Checkpoint. Based on the artwork you've seen in this lesson, who made this artwork? Ooh. Would it be Rosa Bonheur, the animal painter? Henri Matisse, the Fauve, the wild beast? Thomas Hart Benton, who invented... What was he famous for? No, he was the regionalist. Remember, he was kind of rebelling against all of that modern art that was coming out. And he was doing regionalism, a style of art that focused mostly on scenes of rural America. Yes, it was also called American scene painting. So Calder was the one that was doing mobiles, right? Well, which one of these looks is this? It's not a mobile. It's not a scene painting because that would be like a rural country setting. And yeah, it's not an animal. So it's got to be Henri Matisse, the wild Fauve painter. Yes. All right, top-down view is the name for when you look at something from directly above. Top-down view is sometimes referred to as a bird's eye view. A map is an example of something in top-down view. Top-down view is often used in video games. It is rare for fine art to use a top-down view, perhaps because the top-down view isn't how human beings tend to look at things. Human beings tend to look at things from the side or from below. All right, and I know we had a question about that here, so let's find it. Top-down view is often used in video games, and I think we answered all of the questions. Bravo, brava. Make sure that at the bottom of your screen, you take the minute to, I'm trying to find it, save your responses and go to submit them. Bravo, good job.